I could hear them breathing. The shadows. They crept along the walls of the abandoned hospital, whispering secrets of death and despair. My flashlight flickered, the batteries dying just when I needed them most. The darkness felt alive, pressing against me, suffocating me. In the silence, I could hear the faint echo of footsteps, the whispers growing louder, more insistent. I knew then that I wasn't alone. Something was here with me, and it wanted me dead. 3 nights ago, my life was ordinary. I had just started a new job as a night security guard at St. Anne's Hospital, a sprawling complex that had been shut down for nearly a decade. The pay was decent, and I figured it would be an easy gig. After all, what could go wrong in an abandoned building? I arrived at the hospital a little before midnight. The place was eerie even in the moonlight, its windows dark and empty like soulless eyes. The main entrance was padlocked, so I used the side door, the one the maintenance crew had left open for me. My instructions were simple: patrol the halls, check for any signs of trespassers, and make sure the building stayed secure. The first night was uneventful. I walked through the empty corridors, my footsteps echoing in the silence. The hospital was a maze of long hallways and closed-off rooms, most of which were stripped of their medical equipment. I had my flashlight, a two-way radio, and a set of keys. It felt more like exploring a haunted house than working security. The second night, things started to get strange. As I made my rounds, I began to notice odd things. A wheelchair that had moved from one side of the hallway to the other, doors that were ajar when I was sure I had closed them. I dismissed it as my imagination playing tricks on me, but there was an unease that I couldn't shake off. By the third night, the unease had turned into outright fear. It started with the basement. I had avoided it until then, but I knew I had to check it eventually. The stairs creaked under my weight as I descended, the air growing colder with each step. My flashlight cut through the darkness, revealing old gurneys and broken medical equipment scattered about. I moved cautiously, the hairs on the back of my neck standing on end. That's when I heard it, a faint whisper, almost like a child's voice. I stopped, holding my breath, straining to hear. It was coming from one of the rooms down the hall. I moved slowly, my heart pounding in my chest. The door to the room was slightly open, and as I pushed it wider, the whispering stopped. The room was empty, but the air was thick with a sense of malevolence, a feeling that I was being watched. I quickly left, closing the door behind me. I decided to finish my rounds and leave the basement for another time. As I walked back up the stairs, I could have sworn I heard footsteps behind me, but when I turned around, there was nothing there. Back on the main floor, I tried to shake off the feeling of dread. I continued my patrol, checking the wards and offices, making sure everything was secure. It was then that I noticed the surgical ward. The door, which had been locked, was now wide open. I entered cautiously, my flashlight revealing rows of empty operating tables and cabinets. The air smelled of antiseptic and decay. I walked down the center aisle, my footsteps echoing. As I reached the end of the room, I felt a cold breeze. I turned around and saw the source. One of the operating tables had moved. It was now in the center of the room, even though I was certain it had been against the wall. I backed away slowly, my flashlight flickering. Suddenly, the lights overhead turned on, flooding the room with a harsh, sterile brightness. I heard a noise behind me and turned to see a figure standing in the doorway. It was a man, dressed in a doctor's coat, but his face was gaunt, his eyes sunken and hollow. "Who are you?" I demanded, trying to keep my voice steady. He didn't answer. Instead, he stepped into the room, his movements slow and deliberate. As he approached, I felt a wave of cold wash over me. I backed away, my flashlight trembling in my hand. The man reached out, and I saw that his fingers were long and skeletal, his nails blackened and cracked. "Leave," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "Leave this place." I turned and ran, my heart racing. I sprinted down the hallway, the doctor's whispers echoing behind me. I didn't stop until I reached the security office. I locked the door and sat down, trying to catch my breath. My radio crackled to life, and I heard a voice on the other end. "Security, this is dispatch. Is everything all right?" I grabbed the radio, my hands shaking. "Dispatch, "This is Jacob. I need backup. There's someone in the hospital." "Calm down, Jacob. What's going on?" I took a deep breath, trying to steady my voice. "There's a man in a doctor's coat. He told me to leave. He wasn't human." There was a long pause on the other end. "Jacob, there's no one else in the hospital. You're the only one on duty tonight." I felt a chill run down my spine. "I'm telling you, I saw him. He was right there." "Stay put, Jacob. We'll send someone over to check on you." I sat in the security office, the silence oppressive. I kept the door locked, my eyes glued to the monitors. The cameras showed empty hallways, but I knew better. I could feel the presence of something malevolent, lurking just out of sight. Minutes felt like hours as I waited for backup to arrive. My flashlight flickered, and the room grew colder. I could hear whispers, faint and distant, growing louder. The radio crackled again, but this time, it wasn't dispatch. "Jacob," the voice said, sending a shiver down my spine. "You can't escape." I dropped the radio, my hands trembling. The whispers grew louder, filling the room. I felt a cold hand on my shoulder, and I turned around to see the doctor standing right behind me, his eyes empty and lifeless. "Leave," he said again, his voice echoing in my mind. I bolted from the office, running blindly through the hallways. The hospital seemed to twist and turn, the layout no longer familiar. I could hear footsteps behind me, but I didn't dare look back. I reached the main entrance and fumbled with the keys, my hands shaking. The door swung open, and I stumbled outside, gasping for air. The cold night air hit my face, and I looked back to see the hospital, dark and silent. The whispers had stopped, but I knew they were still there, waiting. I didn't wait for backup. I got into my car and drove, not stopping until I was miles away. I called dispatch and told them I was done, that I couldn't go back. They tried to reason with me, but I knew what I had seen, what I had felt. I quit the next day. I couldn't go back to that place, not after what I had experienced. I spent the next few nights sleepless, haunted by the memories of the doctor's lifeless eyes and the whispers that filled the hospital. I did some research on St. Anne's, trying to find any explanation for what I had encountered. What I found only deepened my fear. The hospital had been shut down after a series of mysterious deaths. Patients had reported seeing ghostly figures, hearing whispers in the night. The staff had experienced strange phenomena, equipment moving on its own, cold spots, and unexplainable shadows. One doctor in particular had been the center of many of these stories. Dr. Hargrove, a brilliant but disturbed surgeon, had been accused of performing illegal experiments on patients. He had disappeared just before the hospital closed, and his body was never found. The more I read, the more I understood that I had encountered something far beyond my comprehension. The hospital was cursed, haunted by the spirits of those who had suffered and died within its walls. And Dr. Hargrove was still there, his malevolent presence lingering, trapped in a place of his own making. Now, as I sit in my apartment, I can't escape the feeling that I'm being watched. The shadows seem to move on their own, and I hear faint whispers in the night. I know that St. Anne's is far behind me, but the terror I experienced has followed me, a dark cloud that I can't shake. I fear that the doctor was right. There is no escape. The night shift at St. Anne's was only the beginning, and the darkness I encountered there has marked me. I pray for the strength to face whatever comes next, but deep down, I know that some horrors are inescapable. The night shift may be over, but the nightmare has just begun.